While of that, President Cyril Ramaphosa has some tough decisions to make. A month has passed since interviews for the country's next Chief Justice were concluded. The JSC recommended Supreme Court of Appeal President Mandisa Maya. So let's discuss this now with Chris Oxtoby, who's from UCT's Democratic Governance and Rights Unit. Chris, thank you so much for your time this morning. I mean, many people would be wondering right now, what is the holdup exactly on the part of the president?
Yes, absolutely. I'm wondering that myself. I think everyone who's observing the JSC process is puzzled about why it's taken the president this long to make the announcement. And it's difficult to say really what the reason for that holdup might be.
You know, when we're looking at the different candidates that were interviewed, and of course there was that suggestion by the recommendation rather by the JSC in the form of Mandisa Maya, but it's almost as if it's swaying that there was a said favorite or there was a said candidate who would possibly be the one that takes the helm, and sort of a span in the works was actually put there by the recommendations of the JSC of the likes of the Supreme Court of Appeal President there, Mandisa Maya. But then in that case, does that mean that the president still has his right and he still has the mandate constitutionally given to him so to actually make the decision irrespective of what the JSC recommends? He can still override the JSC recommendation, can he not?
Well, he can, absolutely, and I think that's what makes the delay puzzling. I mean, one possible explanation may be that the president is minded to appoint a different candidate to the one the JSC recommended, and possibly that is causing some delay in making sure that the decision is absolutely watertight and beyond challenge. But as you say, constitutionally, it is the president's choice, and he is not bound by the JSC's recommendation. And it does still seem strange that even if that is the scenario that's playing out, I would still have expected that we'd have got a decision by now. And it is really important that we get a decision, because in the absence of a permanent leader, there's a lot of reforms, a lot of steps that need to be taken in the judiciary that are simply not going to be able to go forward absent a permanent leader being appointed.
Yeah, of course, the actual interview process by the JSC came under severe scrutiny, some criticism, some saying that, you know, various entities were actually overstretching in terms of exactly what they were mandated to do in the very first place. So already that has got some kind of criticism or dark clouds, so as it were, over it. But let's just now play the two parts. If the president should go with the recommended candidate in the form of President Mandisa Maya, that is, of course, of the Supreme Court, and Mandisa Maya becomes now the Chief Justice of South Africa, in light of the criticism by the JSC as well as the interview process, what are the repercussions of such? And then on the other side of it, of course, it's if he actually decides to override the recommendations of the JSC and appoint a different candidate, what would then be the actual consequences of such? Because whichever way you look at it, Chris, it's between a rock and a hard place here.
Yeah, look, I think there's certainly going to be criticism and unhappiness from some quarters, whichever way whichever decision he does make. I mean, I think that is also a reflection of the fact that you know, we had 4 very strong candidates being interviewed for the position, and there's a sense in which one can say that any one of the 4 would have made a good Chief Justice, and therefore picking one is going to create some pushback or unhappiness, you know, in some other circles. I don't think there's anything in terms of sort of consequences of the decision being challenged or anything like that. I don't think there's anything realistically that one would expect to see there, because as we've said, it is constitutionally the president's prerogative to make that appointment. And I think one thing you allude to the criticism of the JSC interviews there, and I think that's a very good illustration of why it is important that the appointment get made shortly, because the JSC interview process is in urgent need of reform. The Chief Justice chairs the Judicial Service Commission, and the JSC sits in just under a month to consider a fresh lot of judicial vacancies, including positions on the Constitutional Court. So it's really, really important that a new Chief Justice is in place to do that process and to start putting some very necessary reforms in place.
Yeah, it almost feels as though it's a hurry up and wait kind of mantra, Chris, in the form that, I mean, the president, for example, was, many would have said that it was actually a fantastic decision that he took a more diplomatic approach to the preferred candidate of the Chief Justice role, so as it were, obviously roping in with the likes of the JSC, whereas before you would have maybe one candidate, right? You'd have the suggestion of one candidate, and then that person would go through the interview process. This time you had 4 candidates going through a very same interview process. So it was business unusual for the president, but then it's a hurry up and then wait. Really applauded for actually having to have these 4 candidates submitted before the JSC for interviewing. But on the other side of it, once now the interviews have been concluded, your recommended candidate has actually been brought forward by the very same JSC. Criticism or not, they did what they're supposed to do. They recommended somebody, and then we back off and we don't say anything. Does it bode a streak of confidence, right? Does it resonate with confidence for the president at this time? Business unusual, but now he's just not deciding or announcing the decision.
Yeah, exactly. I think on balance, despite a lot of the controversy and the problems that we've seen with the process, I do think that opening it up to consider more than one candidate was a good move. I think it is useful for the country to see the different options, to have a chance to think about and debate what each of them would bring to the position. I think that is healthy. I think the process also has been a stress test for some other parts of the system, like how the JSC conducts its interviews, which, frankly, the system hasn't come out well from that. But that's been a reflection of existing problems that have been there before. As for why the decision hasn't yet been taken, look, there are other components in the process that have to happen. One of them being that the president is supposed to consult, or has to consult, with members of political parties. I would have expected that would have already been done and would have been done prior to the JSC interviews, but we don't know officially when that happened and what the result of that was. So that may have taken some time, but in the past, we've seen very short time periods between the Chief Justice candidate being interviewed by the JSC and the President confirming their appointment. In the case of former Chief Justice Mogoeng, it was a matter of mere days from his JSC interview to his appointment officially being made. It's not clear why the fact that it is a more competitive process should have led to such a long delay, even notwithstanding the difficulty of choosing between more candidates.
Yeah, so we're saying that, in the form of former Chief Justice Mogoeng, it was not this kind of, modus operandi, so as it were, decisions were taken within days. If this decision drags on any longer, what could possibly be the repercussions on part of the president and also on part of the judiciary, which is waiting for some kind of leadership, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's where the major problem is. From the president's point of view, I suppose it will, at a political level, add to people complaining about indecisiveness and not making decisions quickly and decisively. But I think far more seriously, for the judiciary not to have a permanent leader, it does make it very difficult for someone in an acting position to drive any kind of meaningful or lasting reform agenda. We heard during the JSC interviews the candidates articulating their vision for the judiciary, and there are many things in that in terms of the modernization of the courts, the possible bringing together of the magistracy and the superior courts that are important and need to be addressed. And someone who's acting temporarily in the position is not going to be able to put in place a vision for the institution as a whole when they know they may only be there for another matter of days or weeks. And of course, Deputy Chief Justice Zondo is currently the acting head of the judiciary. And he has a lot on his plate as well, with the small matter of the Zondo Commission of Inquiry wrapping up its work. So it's very difficult to imagine that he would be in a position to do much to drive reforms of the judiciary. So it's really, really important that the Chief Justice is appointed, whoever that might be, without any further delay, so that these important changes can be implemented.
Chris, we'll leave it there for this morning. Thank you so much for your time. Chris Oxtoby there giving us the latest insight in terms of why is it that we do not have a Chief Justice appointed as yet.